everyone. Hello, YouTubers. This is Anonymous T. Hope you're having an amazing day today. Today, I am going to be discussing the Shiloh, aka Keisha Cole, as I like to call her, versus Phil from last night's Ready to Love Season 5, Episode 11 drama. I may or may not do a full review on the episode. It was low-key kind of boring to me. But if you guys absolutely want one, I will do one. However, I just wanted to focus on this Shiloh versus Phil situation. Who was in the right, who was in the wrong, how things could have been handled differently, and so on and so forth. However, before we dive into the seriousness of this, I wanted to break up the monotony a little bit and do something a little bit fun to kind of describe this whole situation with Shiloh. And really, at the end of the day, the whole Shiloh situation reminds me of a Keisha Cole album. Point blank, period. Like a full Keisha Cole album of greatest hits or something. Because we saw her go through, so many highs and lows, getting rid of the wrong man, smitten with some guy that might be the best looking guy she's seen, and completely gone over him, ignoring obvious red flags. And then when he likes somebody else, all hell breaks loose. And here we are trying to pick up the pieces and put everything back together. So, with that being said, I felt at the beginning, once Tyrone professed his love to Shiloh at the pool party and told her he was dropping all of the other ladies and she was his one, and it freaked out Shiloh. It freaked out her so much that she flipped it on Tyrone and said, "You changed." Exactly what Shiloh did. And she made sure that Tyrone was immediately eliminated after that, versus continuing to pursue things with him instead of being all in on Phil, and Phil was never all in on you. Then when we get into meeting the exes and, Phil and Shiloh, they're in their own little world. Tassia's and her feelings. Shiloh low-key is telling Tassia to let it go. She needs to let Phil go. If he's not gonna love you the way he should, let him go. Because this is my man. That's what Shiloh was trying to tell and convey to Sia. Except for Shiloh didn't know that technically Sydney was number one for Mr. Phil. But that's neither here nor here yet. Next, during the retreat, Miss Shiloh and Phil, they're all booed up. She's singing love, didn't know what I was missing. I knew once we started kissing, except for Phil never would kiss her. Phil would always curve her in some capacity, or give her finally gave her like a very, dead to the bed kiss, if you even wanted to call it that. And I don't understand why Shiloh, aka Keisha Cole, you were not picking up the signs as to why Phil was not giving you all that he needed to give, and you had that with Mr. Tyrone and you dropped him. So then, post retreat, I think it was the last day where Shiloh, she is reading these cards, trying to get, in-depth emotional conversations out of Mr. Phil, who is giving her nothing, giving her no energy, giving her nothing. And she is so in love, she can't see what's happening. And she's in her mind, she's like, Phil is heaven sent. He's sent from heaven. Like, she's completely gone. She is so gone that she doesn't realize that Phil checked out of her quite some time ago. Probably when Sydney arrived at the pool party is when Phil officially checked out, but he needed to make some moves and make some advances towards Sydney first before he could fully let go of Shiloh. But by this point, he was completely checked out. And then, we're progressing towards the end. We're progressing towards all of the suitors finding their one, getting to the final couples, getting down to the nitty gritty. And then all of a sudden, something changes. Then all of a sudden, Shiloh has an epiphany. Shiloh senses that something isn't right. So she wants to have, a heart to heart with Mr. Phil at a club nonetheless. Where there's different activity going on, drinking, loud music, and she wants to discuss feelings and how does Phil feel about her and how he's not doing this, he's not doing that, and what changed, what transpired between them. And it was just giving me love. I thought you had my back this time. Like all of a sudden, it was like Shiloh woke up and realized, oh my gosh, I'm not Phil's number one. Phil cannot meet my family because I'm not his number one. Love, what happened? You were supposed to have my back. What happened? And so, then of course, everything breaks loose. We personally do not know what happened because we did not see anything. All we have is the next day where there's a conversation with Mr. Nephew Tommy. And, at that point, he's trying to get information out of both Phil and Shiloh. And you know what it's giving me? It is giving me last night, couldn't even get an answer. Tried to call, but my phone wouldn't let me dial. That's what it was giving me, that whole conversation. Because they were saying a whole lot of nothing. They were dropping a whole lot of hints about different things that took place and then telling us nothing that actually happened. So that's how I felt. Last night, couldn't get an answer. Could not get a answer. Then we go into the deliberations where we at first thought there was going to be a male elimination this week. And it was kind of like woman to woman, of Shiloh, speaking her truth, speaking what happened. And while she is listening to all of these other ladies discuss their connections and their guys meeting their families, Miss Shiloh, aka Keisha Cole, is thinking, I should have let you go. I should have let Phil go a long time ago and been all about Tyrone. But I was caught up, or you went too far with Phil or something off camera. Something happened to where you were gone off of Phil to the point that you didn't realize until the 11th hour he didn't feel the same about you. And now you're listening to these other connections, wishing you should have let Phil go long time ago instead of Tyrone. So that's on that. So then, Tommy then, of course, tells Miss Shiloh, aka Keisha Cole, to have another conversation with Mr. Phil to see if there's anything to salvage. And I don't know what he was talking about at that point because both looked checked out of each other. Nonetheless, we still had a final conversation with Shiloh, aka Keisha Cole, and Mr. Phil. And essentially what happened was, Shiloh told him, hey, I changed my mind. This isn't going to work with us. This is a wrap. This is a trigger for me. That whole situation went completely left. Blase blah. See you later. And then the final scene was when Shiloh, aka Keisha Cole, met up with nephew Tommy to, of course, tell him her decision on what she planned on doing, whether she was going to stay on the show or not. And since Phil was her only connection and that went completely left, obviously she was done. So at that point, Shiloh was like, I just want it to be over. I just want it to be over. I just want it to be done. That's it. That's it. It's a wrap. It's a wrap for me. That's it. So that was that. So before I dive in, what are your thoughts? What Keisha Cole songs do you agree or disagree with? What Keisha Cole songs would you substitute? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. For those of you who are Keisha Cole fans. So getting back to the seriousness of this all, like I said previously, I never saw it for Shiloh and Phil. There were a lot of people who were team Shiloh and Phil at the beginning, and I never got the vibe from him that he was always all in on her. I think at the time she was his top because of the simple fact the woman that he actually wanted either hadn't come into, fruition yet, which ended up being a bombshell surprise with Sydney, or essentially he was waiting for something better, and Shiloh was his best connection until that. And so, until then he played a certain role, and maybe he led Shiloh on to his fault if, because she's completely gone over him, and completely dropped somebody who was all about her and only her, in favor of somebody who was still juggling, different women he was dating until the very end, essentially. So, I feel as though in that regard, Shiloh should have also been weighing her options. And the problem was by dumping Tyrone so soon, Phil was all she had. Phil was her only egg in the basket. So she basically was all in on him and it was all or nothing, essentially. The problem with that is when you like somebody too soon, and too fast before you notice some red flags, or you might have glanced at the red flags, but thought because of the connection that you had was going to withstand it all and it was going to be you and them in the end, always comes back to bite. Because if Shiloh was paying attention to certain questions she was asking Phil, his lack of physical contact with her, his lack of deep conversations with her, his lack of emotional vulnerability with her should have been red flags that he is not opening up to her. He does not feel a certain way about her. He is, even if he's not doing it with her, he is opening up to another woman. And that should have been on her radar. And Shiloh leading so much with all these questions when they were playing that game at the retreat, just asking all these hard hitting questions. And, even at one point trying to, say some answers for him. She was just completely gone at that point. So I don't know, speculation allegedly. I don't know if they were intimate off camera or whatever, something else that happened, but Shiloh is too upset and too emotionally attached to Phil, with how all of this has played out thus far for me not to think something intimate didn't happen. So that is why I feel strongly about that. As for the actual incident that took place, where do they not play overtime or after hours to the production crew? Like, or is it only certain nights that they work? Because we definitely got, somebody in production working the night where, Mr. Dante had his uh, risotto and Zadia came back and was pointing her finger in his nose and everything else. There happened to be a camera there. Why wasn't there a camera, for this event? Any reason? Any takers? Was it too late? Was it past? Were you gonna get time and a half or something, or what was the situation? So it sounds like to me, number one, the conversation itself, um, anything that's like serious or legit, like why would you have that type of conversation in the first place at some sort of nightclub where there's loud music, where there's drinking, where there's all kinds of stuff going? And then this whole situation where it had to be late in the middle of the night in DC, nonetheless. And I don't know if any of you who live in DC or if you have friends or family that live in DC, but listen, as someone who's been to DC, as somebody who has, briefly stayed there for a period of time, you do not need to be going out anywhere by yourself, at a certain point. And I'll just keep it at that. No matter how great of an area you think it is, you do not go out by yourself under any circumstances. And that's just on that. But that's just on that, like, period, anywhere. So from the perspective of Phil, where he's coming in as a protector perspective, is his point is that he sees it's late at night. There had been some drinks involved. This conversation didn't go the way that it should have went. And instead of Shiloh walking to her car or whatever else, he sees her heading into a dark alley in DC in the middle of the night and basically wants to protect her and wants to, make sure she is in the vicinity to where she is getting back into her car to go home safely. And then, of course, that did not go well, either, because unbeknownst to Phil, that type of contact was a trigger for Shiloh because she, reiterated she's had bruises from a previous situation with somebody else. So Phil, touching her, even though she said it wasn't aggressive, it wasn't, anything that had crossed the line, so to speak, that she felt more so emotionally she was hurt and everything else than it was physically, um, still triggered her. So, and so that's the part where it's a struggle because I understand it in the sense that Phil's kind of damned if he does, damned if he doesn't, in that if he did do this to protect her, that was, something to, potentially save her from something bad happening. But then if Phil did nothing, if Phil just let her be and went on to that dark alley and something bad would have happened, and I don't want to speak that into existence, but just to say that what if that did happen, Phil's never going to forgive himself for not taking that opportunity to make sure Shiloh was in a safe location, and not going down that dark alley. So that's the biggest part for me that I'm kind of having an issue, in terms of, because I see both sides. I see how Shiloh can be triggered by any type of physical touch. And I also see from Phil's perspective, obviously, if somebody at 3, 5 a.m. is heading into an alley, versus going to their car or going to an Uber or whatever, how your protective instincts are going to take in to account to want to protect that person. But the biggest thing is we don't have the context. We don't have the footage. We don't have the conversation. We have no audio. We have nothing to properly, place everything that Shiloh and Phil have told us up to this point, as well as what they've told nephew Tommy, to accurately, say for certain, okay, this is this is that, this is what they should have did, this and so forth. But nonetheless, serious conversations about feelings and where people stand and everything else. I don't understand why that was even taking place at a club, nonetheless. And I don't understand if Shiloh felt that Phil was pulling back or that something wasn't right to where she felt she no longer wanted him to meet her family, why that wasn't a conversation held earlier in the day at some point, like over coffee or over FaceTime or something. Why was that a conversation to have at a club, is what I want to know. And so, and then I think the one place where I will get on Phil is he knew at some point recently that he was all in on Sydney. He knew. The problem was at that point when he realized he was all in on Sydney, Sydney was still all in on Frank at the time because she was unsure about Phil because Phil appeared to Sydney and other women to have made Shiloh his number one choice. But in fact, that technically was not the case. She was visibly his number one choice, but actually he was feeling Sydney more. And actually he opened up to Sydney more, about his family, about some personal struggles. He's had a lot more physical contact with Sydney in terms of, them having romantic and intimate kisses and things of that nature. Phil meeting Sydney's family and everything else. Like, there's just been a lot more depth. Even if it's strictly a physical attraction, there's been more depth to their connection compared to Phil's connection with Shiloh. So again, I don't know if Shiloh had an epiphany or if she realized at the club at a particular moment that, Phil and her were not going to go the distance, or she was at risk for being eliminated from the show, or whatever, that this is what kind of led to this whole situation. But I mean, again, there's no good conversations that ever take place after midnight, nonetheless. And, to be out in a place where, again, you're ending up in potentially going into a dark alley in DC. Like, no, 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 no. And, first and foremost, I want to say that I am always a big proponent of mental health. And I am a big proponent of people always handling any past traumas, any past issues, talking to a therapist, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, whoever is the appropriate healthcare professional that can specialize in what specific issues you are having that is affecting you personally that you may have not dealt with when you were younger, or if it's something that is currently triggering you in your current life at this point that is preventing you from having healthy and stable relationships. And that's the bottom line. Because when Shiloh was going into like her bruises and everything else from a previous situation, I was like, oh my gosh, like we need an intervention. We need you to, we need a appointment. Like we need an immediate appointment. So, because we didn't really get too much Shiloh in terms of her backstory, like if you'll remember at the beginning, since she was an intimacy coach, there were a lot of conversations at the beginning that were like revolving around sex and the group dates and things. So we never really got to know Shiloh like beyond the surface. If you guys were paying attention, we never did, because we never got anything beyond surface between her and Phil, although she would make it seem as though their connection was all that their connection was anything and everything. But I just never felt it because I never saw anything, like I said, of depth that made me think they were going to ever go the distance. I just felt that, she was the best, person that was there until he could secure Sydney. And then once he could secure Sydney, he was going to drop her. But I will say on Phil's part, he should have just let Shiloh know. He should have told her at the retreat, like, hey, I don't feel the same way about you. I want to explore some other potential connections and this and that. And I get it. That week was a male elimination week, but he should have kept it a buck. He should have kept it 100 that he had a stronger connection elsewhere and that Shiloh was not his strongest connection. But he wanted to obviously string her along long enough to secure himself, to the end, or as closest to the end as he can get, depending on what Sydney's decision between him and Frank is in the final episode. And unfortunately, he should have told Shiloh his actual intentions. And I just wish Shiloh could have saw some of the red flags before emotionally attached she became to Phil. Because had she been paying attention to his body language, his lack of responses of substance to her, his lack of romantic interest in her, his lack of, chemistry and intimacy and everything else. Like the only time I really saw him acting like, he was all about her was when he was with his ex and when it was in front of Tasia. But outside of that, I never got this vibe that, oh my gosh, Phil's completely gone over Shiloh. Never got it. It would be nice if the reunion, if there is footage of what actually took place with this conversation, even if it was just audio. If we could just have something of context to, properly put the pieces together of what Shiloh and Phil, said and who did what to whom. Because I feel like that's the biggest missing piece in this whole puzzle of all of this. And so, and I get it from the perspective they've talked to Tommy, they've talked to each other, obviously, but, there's not much, we still don't have, anything to go on. And the thing was, Tommy was giving Shiloh an out if something inappropriate did happen, but again, she reiterated that it didn't, that it was more so she was hurt emotionally and not physically. So, so that's where it's just hard to kind of, depict, what actually did or didn't happen. And I do respect the fact that Sydney, when they had their deliberation, asked Shiloh if it was okay for her to have a conversation with Phil about the situation so that way she could get the context from him as well. Because she had stated, obviously, that she has been getting to know Phil and had not experienced, what Shiloh had just experienced. However, she was not just going to discount it either. She wanted to have, a grown up, adult conversation with Phil about this to put everything into perspective in terms of what actually happened. So I commend Cindy on that. Not Cindy, Sydney on that. So, but it's just hard. It's just very hard, to properly put everything, into its right perspective. All I can do is just give my thoughts based off of what Shiloh's account of events are and versus what Phil's account of events are. And so, and that's all that I can really go on. So yeah, that's really all the thoughts that I have on in the matter. I wish, unfortunately, it didn't happen in the first place. From my perspective, it kind of sounded like Phil was trying to protect Shiloh. However, she didn't receive it as that during the moment because of the fact that he touched her and, tried to pivot her towards her car versus the alley and everything else that, it triggered her from a previous relationship that she was in. And so I get it, but it's just, man, it's just a very tough and difficult situation all the way around. And like I said, I still feel like there's a big piece that is missing, that I feel like the footage, the audio, something would just put it, plug it right in, plug that puzzle piece right in, and we could really have, a thorough, in depth discussion on what actually happened. Because I always want to be as authentic, as fair as possible when assessing different situations and not just automatically, saying, oh, this person did this or oh, this person did that or whatever. That having all of the facts, having all of the evidence to properly put everything into context is key. And, obviously, I'm not a proponent of any sort of violence, any sort of any inappropriate behavior by any means. But because of the situation of it being between 3 and 5 a.m. in the morning, and potentially going into a dark alley in the middle of the night in DC, like, I don't know. That's the part for me that I just keep coming back to in terms to properly, dissect the situation. Like, it's one thing if that wasn't the case. It's one thing if, Shiloh's car, let's say, was right in front of the club and they were outside and Phil was still trying to talk to her. She said she was done talking to him. She was already at his car at her car about to get in, and then he like tries to pick her up and pivot her towards him to still have a conversation. That's completely different versus Shiloh trying to get away from Phil, walking away and walking away from her car and walking in an opposite direction towards a dark alley late at night. That's a completely night and day to where Phil then goes into protector mode and goes after her, to try to pick her up and take her back to a safe location where her car was, even though she may have not wanted to be touched in that moment. So yeah. Let me know what you guys think on this. Because again, it's a very serious conversation. And there's been a lot of opinions on, both sides that I've seen on social media, that I've seen on different platforms and everything else. And it's just a very tough situation. I hope we get some more answers. I'm assuming the first reunion episode will be in 2 weeks, so I'm hoping probably either that episode or by the second reunion episode, we truly get some more information, some more intel, so that we can properly assess it all. But that's just the hiccup for me where it's tricky. It's a very dicey situation in that regard. So, so there's that. Let me know what your guys' thoughts are. Let me know what you guys agree and disagree on. I love interacting with all of you guys. I read your comments. I may not always respond right away, but I try to like all of your comments. I try to respond to some. Um, but I do love the feedback. I love the interaction. And I love how active you guys are. I appreciate it. Um, for those of you, if it's your first time viewing my channel, viewing my video, welcome. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you can look at some of my other videos, look at my playlists and things of that nature, of some of the other shows I talk about, other things I review, other things I react to. For those of you who've been back multiple times, for those of you who have already subscribed, thank you so much. Thank you for your continued support. Again, I'm thankful, I'm grateful for each and every single one of you who continue to show this support, who continue to come back, who continue to come and engage in conversation about various topics and things. I am very much thankful for all of you. Please, those of you who have not already, do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Gets the engagement going, gets more things happening for this channel. And don't forget to hit the notification bell so you're notified the instant I post new content on my page. So that way you are alerted immediately as soon as you get that content. And with that being said, I hope everybody is doing well. I hope everyone is having an amazing new year so far. And like always, I will talk to you guys all very soon.